We salute our friends at Pluralsight, the tech workforce development company, and celebrate their mission to improve and diversify the world's technology workforce. Harness the collective power of hindsight, foresight, and insight with Pluralsight. If you lead or manage a software team, you know setting your team up for success is not easy. Employee turnover, the speed of innovation, timeline delays, security concerns, they're all constantly clouding our vision. Leading technology teams around the world trust Pluralsight to bring skill development and engineering insights to the forefront of the developer experience, increasing productivity, efficiency, satisfaction, and retention. It's the clarity teams need to tackle mission-critical projects, drive cloud transformation, or simply ship scalable and secure code. Harness the collective power of hindsight, foresight, and insight with Pluralsight. Check us out today at pluralsight.com/vision. Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us one of our most beloved returning guests, and I think I know how to pronounce your name at this point, David Pietrusza. Is that close enough?
Yes.
I nailed it. I know how to spell it off the top of my head, but actually I know how to pronounce it as well. David is an extremely prominent historian. You did me the honor of reading one of the chapters for the Anarchist audiobook, which is available at anarchistaudiobook.com. Let's see how many of your books I can rattle off the top of my head. I'm at the point, and this sounds like a brag, but it's not. It's just a function of my advanced age that I don't even know how many books I've done, because I think after 5, your brain starts to forget. Do you know how many books you've done off the top of your head?
If you count the books,
yeah,
if you count the edited encyclopedias and the books for younger readers, we're pushing 50.
Yeah. But see, that's the thing.
But the other, the ones which are just, my book, my name on the spine, and not edited or something like that. Gee, I don't know. Maybe a dozen. I don't know. Maybe more. I don't know.
Right. So let me see how many.
Google is for. Google knows.
Or Wikipedia.
Yeah.
So let's see how many of your books I can rattle off up top of my head. These are the ones I've read. So and I can recommend all of them, because the thing is, if you like someone's book, then you read their second one, you read their third, you keep going. 1968, about the election between Nixon, Hubert Humphrey, and George Wallace.
60.
Well, I got him. Hold on. You did 68, right?
No, that's the one everyone wants me to write.
Oh, 1960. I'm sorry. Then
so
Nixon.
They've all invaded your brain on that.
They have, because those are the big ones. When you have like 3 figures, that's when things get kind of messy. So 1960 with Nixon and JFK. Your big one was 1920, the year of the 6 presidents. Is it 6?
6, yes.
TR's last war, which was about Teddy Roosevelt's final years, which were, he kind of did not go out on a high note. Let's put it that way. Then 1948, which was the big one, because everyone thought Harry Truman was going to lose. It was a given that Thomas Dewey, New York State governor, was going to win election, and he did not. And now your new book, Roosevelt Sweeps Nation, is about, did I miss one in there? A year?
1932.
32, Hitler versus FDR. That's kind of a big one.
Yeah.
And the new one, I guess, is kind of a sequel to that. Roosevelt Sweeps Nation, which is about the 1936 election. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. And what I really loved about this book, which comes out this week, is I almost don't want to spoil it, because the way you wrote this book, it's not at all clear that Roosevelt was going to pull it off, even though, like, I hate spoiling them the book. It's like one of the biggest landslides that America had ever seen.
It is. I think it is the biggest, really, when you get down to it, because he takes 46 out of 48 states and like 60% of the vote, and it's just a crusher. And, is the perennial question is, will the Republican Party survive? Which is usually posed by people who don't want the Republican Party to survive. And I mean, it was really on the ropes in 36, because they were down to, I think, 16 United States senators. They were in worse shape than the Whigs were before they went out of business. I'm not joking.
Yeah. What made you But the thing that you demonstrate in this book, which is almost kind of crazy in retrospect, is it wasn't at all clear that he was going to pull it off. Can you kind of talk about that a bit?
Yeah, there are all these warning signals, and when he takes office, from March to July, there is this incredible boom. It's he puts a big band-aid on the banking system.
Right.
Okay. And so people are taking their money out of the tin cans buried in the backyard, and they're putting it back in the banks, and the runs on the bank stop and all that. And but it is so immediate, it's not really connected to anything he's doing beyond that. Okay. I mean, steel production, people on the job, hours worked, gross national product, everything is up like crazy percentages. And then it goes down again. And by 1936, even in November 1936, the year of the election, you've got like 13-14% unemployment. That's not good.
Yeah.
Okay, it's better than it's been since 1931, but it's not good. So the question is the glass half full or half empty? And he's just got to make people think that it's half full, instead of all the things which are not fixed. And there's a very interesting poll. Gallup does it late in the election year 1936, and it's like a huge percentage of the people are fearing that there's going to be a dictatorship.
Yeah.
And it's the majority of the people in New England, and it's like 70% of the people in the small town. So people are somewhat on edge about that. And then you've got people on the left saying that the Republicans and William Randolph Hearst and all these people are going to have a fascist dictatorship on the other end. But the polls are in. Okay, so the big poll, which everyone remembers, is the Literary Digest. And it's so wrong that the Literary Digest, which if you read the copies of it that you can find, it's a pretty good magazine, goes out of business right after that. Of course, a lot of people go out of business in the Depression, but they that poll really sunk them, because they were predicting Landon was going to carry like 31 states and 54% of the vote, and he gets like in the mid 30s. It's terrible for the Republicans. But what the other pollster is George Gallup. He's starting out. He's the new kid on the block, and what he does is he's the scientific pollster. The Literary Digest is just mail it. It's like some sort of online thing. Just mail in your response, and we'll get millions of responses, and that should work. And up to 1936, it did work. They had always picked the winner, but not always the right percentage. Okay. So in 1934, in the big California race with Upton Sinclair, they get the percentage wildly wrong. Okay. And they're going to get things wildly wrong, as I said, in 1936 with Roosevelt and Landon. But Gallup says in mid-July, I think July 12th to be specific, that it's going to be a close one. It's going to be one of the closest elections in the century, and that Landon is ahead in the electoral vote. He's not ahead in the popular vote, but he's ahead barely in the popular vote. And so you get other people at the time of the Democratic National Convention saying, this could go very badly. This could go very badly for the Democrats. He's losing momentum. Landon seems like a good candidate. He's kind of a liberal, progressive. Oh, he's an old TR. He's an old TR. This is the triumph. This is the ashes in the mouth triumph of the old Bull Moose Party. Because not only Landon was a supporter in 1912 of TR when he polls the party, but his running mate, Frank Knox, was an even bigger supporter. And who was the previous Republican nominee? Herbert Hoover, who had supported TR. So you get and Roosevelt's administration is filled with old Bull Moose Republicans like Harold Ickes and Donald K. Richburg and Henry Wallace, people like that. These essentially rhinos. So you've got all those things heading into the election, and candidates function differently, really differently that year. Trump and Biden, everyone is running from as soon as the polls close, right. They're running again. And so what does Landon does not attend the Republican convention. And so not having attended the Republican convention, what's he do? Well, he goes on vacation. He goes on vacation to Colorado to some rich guy's resort and, kind of sits still for a while, does not commence his campaign for quite a while. And what does Roosevelt do? Roosevelt goes on a 2-week cruise in the North Atlantic off of Maine and Nova Scotia. And people like, Jim Farley and Eleanor and Ickes and people like that are like, this campaign is not working. It's a shame that Louis Howe is dead, Roosevelt's old advisor. Was he really the brains behind Roosevelt? Because what the hell is going on with this campaign? Roosevelt, all the way through, is, don't worry, there's plenty of time to change people's opinions and minds. It's too early in the campaign. Chill out. And of course, he's right on that.
Yeah.
But and also, we think of him as like bombarding the airwaves with these fireside chats. Wrong. He gives about, like, I don't know, what is it, 16 or so in the whole course of these in his first couple terms, and he doesn't give any from April 35 to September of 36. And the one in September 36 is not about some political thing. It's because there really is an emergency going on. There's this first Dust Bowl that we remember, and then there's this second Dust Bowl, an incredible heat wave. Talk about global warming or climate change. But the climate and the temperatures just go crazy in the lead up to the election of 36, where, they record 120 degrees in North Dakota, and the steel is melting or warping in New York City. So this is a big thing. And Roosevelt at one point says, and let me read this because it's so interesting. When people are saying what's going on, you got to get out there. And he says, the public psychology, and for that matter, individual psychology, cannot, because of human weakness, be attuned for long periods of time to a constant repetition of the highest note on the scale. People tire of seeing the same name day after day in the important headlines of the papers and the same voice night after night over the radio. So he gets that. You may think he's some sort of egomaniac or something, but he knows when to draw back. Another interesting thing he does in the course of these fireside chats is he gets a transcript, which is, it's not like downloading from the internet. He has to hire a private company to get not a transcript, but a recording of one of his fireside chats. And he listens to that. Now, why does he listen to it? Because he wants to be better. Good isn't good enough. So he's listening what he can cut, he doesn't write this stuff. He's not a writer, but he's a performer, and he really works at it. No matter who does the speeches, and it's a team. It's like the writers at a Hollywood studio at MGM, and the scripts get mashed together, scenes get put in at the last minute and thrown out at the last minute, and so are his speeches. But they always have the FDR imprint on them, and they go where he wants to go. Whereas Landon, I don't know, he doesn't know where the hell he wants to go.
Hey guys, Your Welcome is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of compare rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try. You might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare. So it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates, quote at progressive.com to join the over 27 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. You guys ever feel like you're being followed around the internet? Maybe advertisers know a bit too much about you. So our sponsor, Ipvanish VPN, is here to help you take back your privacy and help you become anonymous on the internet. Ipvanish is a virtual private network, a VPN for short, which is an important tool that helps you safely browse the internet. You can use a VPN on your computer, tablet, phone, whatever it is when you're streaming media. When you use a VPN, all your data is encrypted. What you're watching, what you're searching, what you're reading. I know what you guys are doing, whatever it is that you're doing. That's important because what you're doing on the internet is no one's business but your own. For a listener of the show, Ipvanish is offering 65% off their annual plan, only $375 a month. Super easy to use. Turn on with one click. It runs in the background, helps to protect you while you're browsing the web. Go to ipvanish.com/malice and use promo code malice. That's MALICE to get your 65% off savings. Their annual plan is just $44.99 for the first year with our discount. This is the time to sign up because with our discount and their current promotion, you can get a VPN for 65% off the usual offering. Here's the thing. Ipvanish is the best of the best. 4.7 out of 5 on Trustpilot with over 6,000 reviews. Remember, it's ipvanish.com/malice to get the deal and start protecting yourself online. Let's get back to the show. Well, in many ways, this was kind of a race of FDR against himself. And it very clearly, this is no question, from every angle, this was going to be a referendum on FDR and his policies.
He tells Ray Moley this straight out. It's about me.
In a sense, it doesn't really even matter who the Republican candidate's going to be. This was a referendum on FDR and his policies. And let's talk a bit about that, because there's this view which I think is completely inaccurate, especially among contemporary conservatives, that Roosevelt was this hardcore leftist ideologue. And, this was his, if he could have had his way, we would have had like a, kind of a communist America. But, thankfully there are forces in check that kept him in place. And from your book and everything I've read, he's ideologically all over the place. It really seemed that whoever he met with at a given moment left that room persuaded he was on their side, whether it's the Wall Street guys or Upton Sinclair, who wanted to abolish profit. In many ways, I would think he's analogous to Bill Clinton in this sense that Bill Clinton, 1 year could be his first thing in the Oval Office is we're going to have gays in the military. And then a couple of years later, he's banning gay marriage at a federal level. I mean, these two views, one would think were irreconcilable, and yet they were both, within the same man. Do you think my reading of Roosevelt's accurate?
Yeah, he's a politician. He's a very good politician. He's Machiavellian. And, Huey Long leaves there and he says, holy cow, he's yes is what I get from FDR. And I'll bet you the conservative head of the Senate, the Democrats, gets the same yes. And he says that to everyone. There's a very telling story in there where when Roosevelt finally gets on the campaign trail and he's riding around the country, and he's got with him one of the young New Dealers called Tommy the Corcoran, who ends up to be one of the, talk about the swamp. He is Mr. Swamp in Washington for decades afterwards. But he's a young guy there. He's just sort of starting out, and he's on the train. And so, Tommy, you learn anything on this campaign trail? Yeah. And Corcoran says, yeah, I think I am. But there's just one thing that puzzles me. Every guy who gets off the platform with you thinks he's going to be appointed Assistant Secretary of Agriculture. You can't name them all. And no, I can't. So, but how are you going to settle this? And he says, well, I'm going to pick the one who I judge will cause the most trouble or the least trouble for me or the most trouble for me if he's not chosen.
Yeah.
So it's completely cynical. It's completely cynical. And in 1932, he has Joe Kennedy and his more conservative advisors write a speech to be delivered at the ballpark, Forbes Field in Pittsburgh. And it is incredibly conservative. It's really, he's like quoting Calvin Coolidge, and we've got to cut the budget by 25%, and taxes are a drag on business, and that's what's going to be the recovery is business, and blah blah blah, blah. Anything you would expect from the conservative running that year. And then what happens is he has to give a speech in Pittsburgh in 1936, and he calls in Sam Rosenman, one of his old-time speechwriters, and says, how am I going to explain this? And Rosenman says, the only thing you can do is to deny you ever said it. You know, but what then he does, but Rosenman is good, and what he does is it all becomes a justification for the spending. It's like, I spent money to save the economy. I did this. I had to get the economy of the country in order first, of the people first, before I did that with the government, blah, 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 blah. So he doesn't deny it, but he puts an entirely different spin on it. And it's a very class warfare kind of campaign, starting with the State of the Union address, which is described by the New York Herald Tribune as very bitter, very bitter. And he goes on with that to at the convention in Philadelphia, talking about the economic royalists. And then he talks about, in his last major speech at Madison Square Garden, talking about the forces arrayed against him on the right. And he runs against the right, basically. He picks his opponents and makes it work for him. It's like he doesn't talk about Landon so much, but he talks about the Liberty League, which was a bunch of old school Democrats, really the anti-prohibitionist wing of the party. These are the guys who had bankrolled the opposition to Herbert Hoover in 1932, when they were just banging him, bang, 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 bang. Not that he wasn't going to lose anyway, but almost demonizing him. And so these are the guys who wrote the checks to smash Hoover in 32, and FDR cashed that check. Okay. And then they turn on each other. So many people turn on Roosevelt. It's one thing when you're down in the dumps and the polls are down and you've lost the election, or the Red Army is at the gates of Berlin and people start jumping ship. But you see a lot of people in the course of Roosevelt's campaign career, where he never loses after a certain point. And whether it's John Nance Gardner as vice president, or Jim Farley, his campaign director and postmaster general, Democrat national chairman, or people like that, or Al Smith, Huey Long, Father Coughlin, all these people had been supporters of him. And they all turn on him at some point because they feel that they've been betrayed, because he does talk out of both sides of his.
But it's not that mouth. They feel it; it's that he turned on them, and brazenly so.
He did, and so he runs against Hearst, the big press baron. Running against the media is nothing new. Okay, running against fake news is nothing new. And Hearst is a very unpopular figure, although he wants Hearst's backing. Okay, he tells one of his advisors or friends, let's keep Hearst on board, because I don't have a lot of newspaper support. I need this guy. But once he realizes it's not going to happen, then Hearst is the bad guy, and these Liberty League guys are the bad guys. And so some of the speeches are like, against the guys in the silk hats and things like that. So it's very, very class warfare that he's running, of course, which is ironic, because he's the original trust fund baby.
So one of the things I think what you do a good job of demonstrating in this book is it's very hard for us to appreciate what the intellectual climate was in 1936, because we had an unprecedented depression that wasn't going anywhere by pretty much all accounts, right? And what we also had was 40 years, at least, of hardcore leftist ideology, Marxism specifically, predicting that capitalism was going to collapse And once that happens, you're going to have this kind of Marxist hegemony, and the workers are going to rise up. 1917, obviously, that happens to some extent. It's not the same thing, but Lenin takes over and forms what became the Soviet Union. So when you see all their predictions starting to come true, the Overton window of what are we going to do about this depression that isn't going to go anywhere was somewhere between communism or some hardcore, heavily regulated capitalism. But the view was this was clearly a function of capitalism, just as capitalism's critics had been predicting for decades, and now they've been proven correct.
Yeah, and it's not just the Marxist left. It's not just the socialists and the communists. So the communists are picking up steam. They're not going to pick up votes in 1936, and they don't want to pick up votes,
right?
Because Joe Stalin has said, "Okay, time for the Popular Front." Well, whether it's in France or the United States, so try and work with people and co-opt them, and get them on board with this Spanish Civil War thing, or any number of fronts. And so they're going to pick up influence. I mean, you see people which are known to this. Aaron Copland supported the Communist Party ticket in 1936. S.J. Perelman, people like that. Respectable people, not necessarily Communist Party members, but they're thinking this is the crisis of capitalism, and these are the guys who are serious about fixing it. The socialists have been serious about fixing it or wrecking it further for a long time too. But their problem is they keep getting co-opted by the Democrats.
Yeah.
They get co-opted by Wilson, and then they get co-opted by FDR. Norman Thomas gets like something 900,000 votes in 1932, and then he crashes and burns in 36 because New Deal. Okay. Also, that's one of the reasons why people are unsure how the election is going to turn out, and how Democrats are unsure that it's going to turn out. The socialists had run up a big vote total in the years just before 1936 in New York State. They had got like hundreds of thousands of votes for mayor. And if they get half of those votes, even statewide, the Democrats are afraid that they could tip the state to the Republicans.
Yeah.
Amazing. And Roosevelt is panic stricken that when Herbert Lehman, the Democrat governor, says, "I'm not going to run again," that this could cost Roosevelt New York State. This is hard to believe. This is hard to believe from the standpoint of today and what happened when Roosevelt carried New York by 1 million votes, but they were worried. And it was the same thing in Michigan, where he has to bring back Frank Murphy from the Philippines, where he was our sort of consul general, to run for governor of Michigan because he was afraid he was going to lose Michigan. The straws in the wind were many that he was not going to win. Of course, they were all wrong, but they were there.
One of the things that is, I took a lot of notes throughout the book because it was really kind of interesting. You were talking about the fear of dictatorship. There was a line from a draft in a speech like the day after Roosevelt was inaugurated in 1933, where he said, "As your new commander-in-chief, under the oath to which you are still bound, I reserve to myself the right to command you in any phase of the situation which now confronts us." And I think there's a great book by John Diggins, who I think was a National Review historian, called Mussolini and Fascism, The View from America. And something that's very much swept under the rug is to what extent Mussolini was an influence on FDR and the New Deal. You had the Blue Eagle can you talk about it, the Blue Eagle and the Blue Eagle parades and stuff like that?
Yeah, the Blue Eagle is the symbol of the National Recovery Administration, which has the support of business, because really it's a cartelization of business. Okay, we'll get like, what was it, 1,200 business codes or something, and the famous examples of how wrong it went was the Schechter brothers, 6 brothers in Brooklyn, and they're running a poultry market. and the customer can't, they had live chicken. So the customer can't say, I want that chicken. You have to have a chicken at random. That's in the code. And the Schechters are arrested for this and fined. And then there's another guy named Jacob Maged in Jersey City who is fined because he doesn't charge enough for pressing a pair of pants. Okay. So,
Yeah, so let me just clarify a little bit. So like basically like if I'm a dry cleaner, right, or whatever it was at the time, I have to charge 5 cents, whatever it is, right? But the thing is, if I'm on Broadway and you're on 10th Avenue all the way out of the boonies, ostensibly, if it would be easier for you to charge less to compete, someone might go those 2 extra blocks, save the money. You can't do it. You're SOL. Everyone has to have the same rate.
You have to be, you have to be the same price as the big guys.
Yeah.
So no, that's not good. And the Supreme Court said that's not good, and they get rid of that. But the manner of which the people got behind this, you had to put this blue eagle in all the store windows that you were complying. William Randolph Hearst had to who hated the NRA at first and was going to go to war with Roosevelt on that, then puts the blue eagle on the front page of all the newspapers. And you have these giant parades. It's all boom, boom. It is very martial and statist, shall we say. Roosevelt does make a quote or two in favor of Mussolini. It's and when he was, the quote you used is, I think, particularly sinister in that he's doing it to a veterans group. And so these are the guys that might, rough up the opponents if given the word from above. In 1920, which just occurred to me, Roosevelt pulls into a place in Washington where the veterans groups had lynched an anti-war protester in a very brutal, horrible way. And I think FDR makes a statement about, well, you showed them. Okay. One of those FDR quotes sort of, lost to history, but he certainly didn't protest it when he blows into town a couple weeks later. So the NRA is very much the corporate state. And then concurrently, the other big program is the AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Administration, which is based on scarcity. In a time of depression, when people don't have anything, it's like, let's mow under the cotton, let's kill the pigs, let's mow over the corn, which is great for farm prices. But what do you do if you're in a city? What do you do if you got to eat? What if you got to buy a new undershirt? Okay. Not good. And Roosevelt says to Henry Wallace, the Secretary of Agriculture, early on in the year, Henry, I don't care what you've got to do, but the price of corn has to stay steady in June, July, August, September, October, all the way to November 1st. So it's very political in many ways, but the Supreme Court gets rid of both of those programs, and they actually do them a favor because it clears the deck, and then he can concentrate on the relief programs and the public buildings and the grants and aid or whatever to and Social Security. Even Social Security is structured in a very interesting way. It is in response. You were talking about, is he leading the way or what's his plan? At first he says, no, these pensions, not a good idea. He says publicly. And when Harry Hopkins says, we got to do this, the next day, bang, no, we're not going to do this. What we have to concentrate on is unemployment insurance. But then out of California, there's this Townsend plan, Dr. Francis Townsend. We're going to give $200 a month in real dollars back then to every old fogey in the country, and they're going to have to spend it, and the economy is going to be revitalized, and the old people are going to be taken care of. And this gets legs. And Roosevelt hates it. One of the reasons he hates it is this. It's a dole.
Yeah.
He did not like the dole.
No one did at the time. It was regarded like the thing when the Great Depression hit, it was regarded as just something completely embarrassing to be on welfare.
You should work for this. You could accomplish. And that's one reason why you walk around wherever you live and you see all these New Deal bridges and post offices, because
Right.
you actually did get something for the money, because not that people weren't on relief and not doing something, but an awful lot of people were engaged in doing this. So where was I going with this? Where was I going with the all these?
We were talking about Mussolini and
yeah, we were talking about Mussolini, but we were talking about all these programs going on then, and they are Social Security. That's where we were. Senior moment. So in Social Security, it's introduced. The Townsend Plan is introduced into Congress, and the next day,
I feel like I'm talking to President
FDR. the next day, FDR introduces Social Security, and it passes in August 1935. Okay, that's cool. They don't start collecting the taxes and taking the 1% out of the payroll of the working people until January 1937. They don't start taxing until after the election. Then they're not going to pay out until 1942. The Democrats lose the midterms in 1938. So then what happens? You can collect Social Security starting in January 1940, just in time for the next presidential election.
Right.
The first lady, not the first lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, but the first lady who collects is from Ludlow, Vermont, where Calvin Coolidge went to high school. She had put $24 in contributions in, and her first check was $22.
Yeah.
And she lived to be 100 years old, and she collected $24,000 based on the $24 she put in. It was like really hitting the lottery. It doesn't work that way for everyone. But what Roosevelt says is, maybe somebody comes up to him around 1940 and says, I don't think the economics of this program are really, really solid. And he says, no, I think you're right. But the politics are. By making it contributory,
yes,
nobody is ever going to do away with this program.
Hey guys, what do you think of when you think of fall? For me, it's a packed schedule. Luckily, Factor's ready-to-eat meal delivery system keeps me fueled up and feeling good no matter how crazy my days and nights get. And let me tell you, it's pretty crazy here in Austin. Whether you need a quick lunch or a nutritious meal that's ready in minutes, Factor makes it easy, and it's cheaper than takeout. That's a serious win. Factor's the perfect mealtime solution for the on-the-go lifestyle. Their meals are fresh, never frozen, delivered ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes. You can fuel up fast and add on with your day. They offer 30-plus meals a week, 36-plus add-on options, smoothies, juices, snacks. They keep you going no matter what's on the schedule, and it's cheaper than takeout. And thanks to their commitment to ingredients with integrity, you can feel good about what you're eating every day. They were very, very smart. They send me a bunch. I heat them up. The smoothies were terrific, and it's a great way to have your macros or calories met. They've got protein plus, they got keto stuff, and it's quality food. What I want you to do is head to go.factor75.com/welcome130. If you use code welcome130, you get $130 off across 6 boxes. That's code welcome130 at go.factor75.com/welcome130. You get $130 off. You save time, good food, and you get on with your day. And you've been telling me you're welcome. Hello, guys. Michael Malice here, underwear model to the stars. If you want to get inside my pants, you want to wear Sheath underwear. And the great thing about Sheath underwear, I just collabed with them to make and design my own pair. And they're inspired by dynamite, just like the cover of the Anarchist Handbook. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice, Malice, you get 20% off. What's great about Sheath, and I wear them every day, is they've got this dual pouch technology, because there's one pouch for one part of your male anatomy, another pouch for another part of your male anatomy. First time you try them on, you're getting all your hands in there. You're like, this is weird. And from then on, you're like, oh, this is the most comfortable underwear I will ever wear. It's got added comfort, added performance, added mobility. And there's something a little subversive about talking to someone while the whole time your underwear is cupping your junk. I'm not going to lie. I do enjoy that aspect of it. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice, you get 20% off your underwear, including my underwear. That's sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice, MALICE, for 20% off. Let's get back to the show. One of the things that is very interesting in this book, and historically speaking, is the black vote. Now, we have this kind of Disney idea that the Southerners were segregationists and racist, and everyone else just loved African Americans, and it was very nice, and it's just completely ahistorical nonsense. W.E.B. Du Bois, who founded the NAACP, had such poor choices that he ended up endorsing Wilson, who was easily...
He ended up endorsing the Communist Party.
But that's late. Hold on. But he's endorsing Wilson, who was, I think, probably the most racist president we ever had in terms of ideologically committed to racism. And the black vote was for a long time as hardcore Republican as it is now hardcore Democrat, because that was the party of Lincoln. And Roosevelt was the one who started heavily to change all that, despite not really giving two craps about civil rights. He was much more interested in those Southern Democrats being a big part of his base. And you talk about that in this book. Can you break that down a bit?
Yeah. The black vote holds for Hoover in 1932. It's one of three groups that does. The wealthy, who is a smaller group in 1932, rural Northeast, from New England up to Pennsylvania through upstate New York, that holds for him. And blacks, they hold for him, and fairly solidly, not as solid as before, but pretty well, because they're still worried about the Southern Democrats controlling the party.
Yeah.
And they look where Roosevelt got his support from. It wasn't from the sidewalks of New York like Al Smith. He fared very poorly with the Northeasterners, but the West is for him and the South is really for him. And where does he hang out? He hangs out in Georgia. And who's his congressional leadership? It's particularly in the South, it's Southerners. And I don't know how terrified he is of losing their support, if that's the reason, or like you say, he doesn't care. He doesn't seem to care about, he'll provide jobs for blacks and he'll provide relief, but he will do nothing about social equality at all. We know he doesn't desegregate the army. And one of the big issues around 1936 is federal lynching legislation. And he will not make a move towards that. And I think there were things that could have been done. I mean, when you've got federal kidnapping, across state lines, or bank robberies across state lines, you can federalize those crimes, okay? And I think very easily, and they'll stand any scrutiny on the courts. And there is a case that year where a black is kidnapped and taken from a jail in Alabama, taken back to Florida and lynched. So the idea could be there if you want to do it. He doesn't want to do it.
And let's also
there at all. Eleanor wants to do it.
Yeah.
Eleanor, but she doesn't have the juice to convince her husband that this should happen. But by 1936, 40% of blacks are on either relief or on the federal payroll, and you can't beat Santa Claus. Okay, you can't beat that level of federal largesse. Gallup takes a poll in the spring, and it's like it's like, is it men, women, rural farmers? Farmers really love the Roosevelt too. What percentage of people on relief? Well, oddly enough, 78%. Sean Trend did a little book on elections, and he contends that the older black vote stayed Republican, but all the young folks shifted over massively to the New Deal and the Democrats. Not as massively. They still weren't there. There was still a residue of Republican support. So in breaking it down ethnically, The Jewish vote is 90% for FDR. The Catholic vote is 75%, and the black vote is still only 71%. But that's a massive shift, and it's not going to shift back.
Yeah, there's, I think what people don't appreciate, because a lot of times our view of history is very whitewashed, no pun intended, is what lynching actually was. Now,
Oh, it's horrible.
I know you want to like to white. I mean, even lynching is whitewashed because you have this idea that someone is grabbed and they're just hanged. That's not at all what happened. They were often
It's
physically
barbarism.
Yes, they would often be a huge mob. They would be physically dismembered. People would take body parts as souvenirs, and then often they'd go into like the black ghetto neighborhoods and try to kill more people and burn those areas down.
Well, it might
So
burn people alive.
yeah, they burn people alive. So it's even as bad as people think it is. It really was something that in our day and age, there's almost no analog, and it's just
And do you
crazy.
think these people weren't going to be convicted and executed anyway?
Right.
This
Yeah.
is just completely unnecessary, crazy sickness.
And a lot of times you would have these people who were lynched, they would make postcards or souvenirs out of it.
Oh, the one in Texas, there was a one in 1916 or so that was Waco. Horrible things keep happening in Waco.
Yeah.
And this was really well documented because the NAACP sent a reporter or a correspondent in, and who talked to a lot of people and saw that. And there was a lynching. Roosevelt does condemn a lynching in 1935, 1936. Okay. And what's the story? Well, that's good, right? Yeah, it's good. It's the lynching of two white men in California who were kidnappers and murderers. And that was a crazy thing too, because everyone knew that lynching was coming, and it was broadcast on the radio. It was broadcast on the radio, and the governor said, "Good job, guys." Now, why does Roosevelt condemn that lynching? Because the governor was a Republican.
Oh, wow. Well, it's also kind of just disturbing to watch how it's one thing to be like, like you hear some of these horrific crime cases today, and so for a politician to be like, "Oh, I disapprove." It's like, it's all well and good to disapprove. What are you going to do about it? Just send out a press release that like, this is bad and I condemn it? Like, many of these people had the power to do something about it, but they were perfectly happy to sit on their hands.
Yeah, I mean, but Roosevelt doesn't even send out
Right.
the memo,
Um,
So there's that tension. There is that tension where the Republicans know they're in trouble with the black vote, and so they put a lot of money into trying to keep it. The Democrats put a lot of money in too, and they also 1936. Two things. The Democratic Convention, which is really they don't even take roll calls. It's just everybody's in favor of everything. It's like the Politburo had like more dissent. But the two big things happen. One is there are black delegates for the first time to a Democratic National Convention. There's like 12 of them and 22 alternates. And, the Republicans had delegates since Reconstruction. It was no big deal and whatever. But the Democrats didn't, and it does cause a stink. Cotton Ed Smith, the senator from South Carolina, eventually walks out of the convention. Strom Thurmond was a delegate. He does not walk out, interestingly enough. He was more progressive back then. And the other thing is that the 2/3 rule is abolished by the Democrats. And this gave the Southern Democrats a veto power on who they were going to nominate. And this gets knocked out that year by voice vote. Maybe it didn't really pass, right. But and this also creates a buzz that maybe Roosevelt's doing this so he can have a third term. Of course, that's not going to happen. Never happen, but it does.
One of the things that there's a lot of talk in contemporary politics about conservative Democrats, and the conservative Democrats, they all switched with Nixon or whatever, and they became Republicans, and that was a concern for Roosevelt. But what people don't understand as much is it was the leftist Southern Democrats, which were also a problem for Roosevelt. I'm specifically thinking of Huey Long. So, this idea that Roosevelt is as left as it gets in politics is completely historical. Can you
Yeah.
talk about Huey Long and his relationship with Roosevelt?
Well, yeah, not all the Southern Democrats are conservatives. They had a senator back then named Claude Pepper, who was around forever. And his nickname was Claude Red Pepper. Okay.
Yeah.
He was flirting with Henry Wallace in 48. Huey Long is economically very left wing, very populist. And you see, well, Hugo Black, who was appointed to the Supreme Court eventually by Roosevelt, and was his hatchet man in running these congressional investigations when he was in the Senate, had been a member of the Ku Klux Klan. But he was very progressive. One of the reasons why Roosevelt puts forward the NRA to control business is to forestall this Wages and Hours Act that Hugo Black is putting it forth in the Senate, which is you can't work more than 6 hours a day, and if you do, you can't transport the goods over state lines. It's like, hello. And that's another reason why FDR moves to the left to forestall these guys. But Huey Long is one hell of a, Roosevelt.
Wait, can I say something?
Yeah.
Would Huey Long, people can wrap their heads around, he was basically if like Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders had a kid, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. He's an amazing orator. He's a better orator than both of those two guys put together. Okay. And he's, I'd say, power mad, really, when you get
for
down
sure.
to it, and makes Louisiana into essentially a one-party dictatorship. He's really cracking down on any individual freedoms or liberties of the municipalities. At one point, you've got armed soldiers and sandbags and machine guns of Long and facing the same forces of the mayor of New Orleans. So it is amazing. He wants to run in 1936. And his idea is not to beat Roosevelt in the primaries, but to just run third party and give the country back to the Republicans, who he theorizes would make an even bigger mess of it than they had under Herbert Hoover, and would come crying for the Democrats, specifically one Democrat, to come back in. But he has this kind of Townsend plan for everybody, and it's called the Share Our Wealth. And everyone's going to get a payment. Everyone's going to get a radio. Everyone's going to get a lump sum. And he's just going to do this by seizing not just, a cap on incomes where you can't make, you're not going to keep anything more than above a certain level. But if you've got $1 million, we're going to just take everything.
Yeah.
And all the economists say this cannot possibly work. You're going to have to take all the incomes above like $4,000 to pay for this program. And whether he believed in it or not, he had these Share Our Wealth clubs.
Well, can I say one thing?
Yeah.
He's in a very good position, because if he can't pull it off, he can say, look, I'm fighting for you, but all your enemies, my hands are tied. I'm the only one fighting for you. Just me versus everybody.
Well, it was because he was fighting virtually everyone.
Yeah.
When FDR and the New Deal guys are really after him for taxes, and they would trail him into a store if he was going to buy a shirt or something. It was the Al Capone model of getting him or his henchmen, who were very sloppy about being henchmen, and but he says, somebody asked him about the graft in New Orleans or in Louisiana. He says, yeah, we got graft, but we got highways too. And in other places they got the graft and they don't have the highways. So he built all these bridges across the Mississippi. He paved all sorts of highways. He was famous for giving free textbooks to the kiddies. Well, I remember reading this wonderful biography of him by T. Harry Williams when I was in school. I recommend it. I can't recommend it enough. But I'm reading about his program, and it's like, this sounds like Nelson Rockefeller's program. This is except for the what he did in Louisiana, and some critics or historians have said, well, his national program is so radical, but really his Louisiana program isn't. He doesn't implement any of these things, the income redistribution in Louisiana at all. It's all public works, it's all very much like FDR in a way of building things, and and maybe a program for literacy, stuff of that level. It's not particularly radical by our standards today, but what he would have done nationally, I don't know. And he would have done it ruthlessly, and colorfully. I mean, if the people watching this have never seen a YouTube video of him going tearing the words loose from his brain into the audience and the world, I mean, it is something to see. He's really entertaining. And when he would go on the radio, he'd outjaw Roosevelt.
Oh yeah. Your Welcome is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Now, most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, while you're listening to me talk, you're probably also driving, cleaning, exercising, maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you could be doing right now, which is getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy. You can save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save over $700 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles in your policy, being a homeowner, and more. So just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join the over 27 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates, national annual average insurance savings by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2020 and May 2021. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations.
Hey guys, Jay Cutler. Started a new podcast called Uncut with Jay Cutler. Most of you know me from the NFL, some of you have seen me on Instagram, and some of you know me from the reality TV world. Each week I'm taking you along with me as we discuss football, trending topics, and whatever's going on in my life each week. I'm bringing along people that are special in my life. Former teammates, friends, and some new people that I like and respect. That's what you're supposed to do, right? Podcasting. I think I'm doing this right. Can't wait to get started with you. Go subscribe now. Uncut with Jay Cutler, Apple Podcasts, Podcast One, and Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Let's get back to the show. One of that's the thing I think also people don't appreciate. There was a real thirst for dictatorship. It didn't really have that kind of negative connotation in 1936 as it does now, certainly post World War II, because the Depression was worldwide, right? No one knew what really to do about it. Different countries are trying different things. And basically America and other countries returned to this kind of almost caveman brain where it's like, we need the guy on the white horse to come in and save us all from this mess. And Hitler was Hitler in Germany, who basically, besides the anti-Semitism and all the other things, but basically he was kind of had an incoherent, economic philosophy. It was just like, I'm the guy who's going to fix everything. Vote for me. And it's like, well, that sounds good. I'm going to vote for that.
It seems to work for a while. I've read some analyses that like after 1938, it just wasn't going to work anymore. And that's one reason why, aside from just being crazy, why he wanted to go to war so soon, because his economic plan was just going to run out of steam. And then, we'll just make slaves out of everyone in Europe, and that'll fix everything. We'll live every German a king at that point.
Yeah. But I mean, that kind of FDR very much fed into that approach. Now, obviously he's not riding on a horse because of the polio.
No, but Al Smith sort of supports a dictatorship at one point after the 32 election. And then of course he's going to turn against Roosevelt for being unconstitutional and unjeffersonian and all that.
Yeah, it's just amazing how, you talk about, what was the subtitle of this book right now?
FDR's 1936 landslide and the whatever it was, I forget. It wasn't going to be the original.
And the triumph of the liberal
And the
ideal.
triumph of the liberal idea. That
Yeah,
was the publisher's idea.
But it's interesting because compared to 32, which was much closer, this was really the realigning election.
Yeah,
Because
and
I did a
Roosevelt
I
wants
did a
to
book.
do that.
Yeah, I did a book with Matt Hughes, who's a UFC champion, and he said you're only a champion once you defend your belt, right? So it'd be one thing if he had that landslide in 32, but 36, especially with the congressional races in addition, was really the year that's like, all right, this ship's not getting turned around.
Right. In 1932, what the 1932 Democratic platform is remarkably conservative. And one of the historians, I think, has said, if you look at the 1932 campaign, it's like FDR and Hoover are reading each other's lines.
Yeah.
So that people aren't sure what the direction the country is going to go in. Also, even in 1936, there's a reluctance on the part of the public to go much further. Gallup does a poll, I think, again, earlier in the year, and he says, if there were only two parties, and one was called conservative and one was called liberal, which one would you like? This is 1936, where Roosevelt is going to carry 46 out of 48 states. 53% conservative. The New York Times endorses Roosevelt and says, we hope his next term will be more conservative.
Yeah.
But they still endorse him. So the public kind of wants to pull in its reins. And when Roosevelt doesn't pull in his reins, and the economy takes this downturn, this is where his political skills just, hit the skids after that election, where the Wagner Act and this wave of strikes, which takes hold, and the idea that I can pack the Supreme Court, the public just turns on him, and there's this massive. But you see that you see that so often. Take a look at 1964, LBJ's big landslide, and then 2 years later, the Republicans just they don't take control of Congress, but they just come back, poised to take power in 1968 again. So you see that, it's quite often.
Well, it's also kind of interesting because I think with Roosevelt, you had the big attack that he's this autocrat, he's this kind of blue blood who, thinks he's better than everybody, and he's a aspiring dictator. And as soon as he starts to try to pack the court, which was his first major political defeat, and he didn't see that coming, I think for a lot of people, it's like, holy crap, like all this criticism for 6 years has now been validated. And, then it becomes even, it's like kind of retroactively, it's kind of the dam breaks.
And a lot of Democrats,
Yeah,
a lot of Democrats really halt that move on his point. They don't care for it either. But what you do is you scare the hell out of the justices, and they want to preserve the institution of the court. Charles Evans Hughes starts flipping on the Supreme Court Chief Justice, starts flipping on decisions, and then some of the more conservative guys just resign, and you end up with Roosevelt gets guys like Hugo Black and Felix Frankfurter on the Supreme Court at that point. So that then you get a liberal court, and the court stays liberal for a very long time.
I know that you're one of the most productive people I know in terms of your work. Are you working on another book at the moment?
I am.
Are you allowed to tell us a little bit about it?
No, I'm not.
Okay, you can tell me off camera then, maybe.
Okay. It's totally off course of these election books, but
okay,
another election book might come around the corner.
I'm sorry for this elementary school question, but I feel like you're going to have a good answer. What surprised you the most to learn in the course of the research of this book?
I think the main thing is how much the election was in doubt for people.
Yeah,
I think that's the big one. You've got all these other points, and you've got all these people wandering around, and mystifying people like Father the Divine, who thinks he's God, and the communists are making alliances with him. So you've got strange things like that. But but they're not the big picture. The big picture is how in the balance things were at certain points. And we've seen, recently where you win the popular vote and you don't win the electoral vote. And it hangs in the balance. And that was, July 1936. It was hanging in the balance. And the Republican campaign was just so weak that it just collapses.
Let me ask you this. I mean, this is a fair question because now we've got almost a century worth of history to look back. Do you think if there had been, the Republicans had a very weak field to pick from, because after 32 and 34, they had all been kind of voted out of office. There was barely any choices. But do you think if there had been another Republican candidate, he would have had a significantly better outpouring in either popular or the electoral vote?
John Nance Garner, Roosevelt's vice president, says that they should have nominated Hoover.
Okay.
And he says that he'd still lose, but he wouldn't take down as many Republicans.
Yeah.
Okay. And he says, the Republicans used to be smart, but not anymore. And they're not going to go with Hoover. They're going to go with whoever. And Garner was one of those guys. Garner, both guys at the top of the ticket, never seemed to be in doubt. Never seemed to be in doubt that they were going to win, where everybody else was, kind of nervous and shaky at one point or another.
What's kind of interesting is we're going to play a little bit of hot potato, because in my next book, The White Pill, Cactus Jack Garner plays kind of a bit of a role. People can't wrap their heads around this today, but back you still have this to some extent, where you have ticket balance in that if you'll have someone who's more moderate as the main candidate, they'll have someone from the party's base as the VP. Paul Ryan was supposed to have been this in 2012 when he was Mitt Romney's running mate. John McCain picked Sarah Palin because she was regarded as, kind of a true blue conservative. FDR's vice president, who was Speaker of the House, John Garner, he was so against FDR running for a third term in 1940, they dropped him from the ticket and put in Henry Wallace.
Yeah, and Wallace is the complete opposite.
Yes.
By the time the second administration or term of Roosevelt, FDR is convinced, and I think he's right, that Garner is leaking stuff to his old pals in Congress to sabotage the program. And Garner is another one of those guys who lives to be like 96 or something, and lived in Uvalde, Texas too. I was amazed that no news article mentioned that this was Cactus Jack Garner's hometown that I saw. There's no sense of history.
Yeah, I was going to say, you think contemporary corporate journalists?
What else was this damn town known for before this? And so then he replaces it with Henry Wallace,
right,
who is this, radical kind of guy. And then Harry Truman, who is this moderate guy who I don't even think he knows, but he's made I think Truman emerges in part because of his work on investigating, waste in the war programs, but also because he's the Warren Harding, the available man of 1944, or he's the Goldilocks candidate. He's not too hot, he's not too cold, he's not too southern, he's not too northern, he's not too labor, he's not too anti-labor. So the other guys are like Jimmy Burns, who had been running the war effort domestically, is too southern, too segregationist, maybe too conservative at that point, but also too fallen away Catholic, so that the Catholics would say, hey, this guy's not on our team anymore. And the Protestants are saying, hey, maybe this guy's still on the other team. We don't know. So he never is the man who can go in, or is William O. Douglas too liberal at that point? He was hot stuff at one time. He could have been the president, but it turns out to be Truman. So Roosevelt and balancing things balancing the cabinet.
Oh yeah.
You know, how conservative or how liberal is Cordell Hull? Moley calls him a conservative. You know, I mean, he's a big free trade guy, but how conservative is he otherwise? And look how many Republicans. Roosevelt really does want to build a national coalition of progressive Republicans and progressive Democrats, so that he's got 3 Republicans in his cabinet, his initial cabinet, include Treasury, Agriculture, and Interior. Okay. Ickes gets it when the guy that Roosevelt wanted dies in a plane crash, and he was a Republican. Okay, Bronson Cutting. So with those, and those are big, important. You might not think of them as important cabinet appointments now, but 25% of the population in those days is still living on the farm.
Yeah.
The farm vote is incredibly crucial, and Interior is incredibly crucial in holding the West.
Yeah.
In holding the West.
I want to congratulate you on this book. I know it's been a long time coming. Roosevelt Sweeps Nation. It's out now. I was happy to endorse it. And again, what I just really loved about the book is it almost reads like a murder mystery. Or I don't know if that's the exact term, but you're reading it, you're like, is this guy going to pull it off? Even though your brain knows, yeah, he goes on to win this one and then 2 more after that. David, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
I think I really just talking to you and seeing you again, really, because I don't get to New York anymore, neither do you, and I don't think I'm gonna get to New York. It's beyond me at this point.
Yeah, you are welcome.
Saddle up and get ready for Westerns Weeks on Pluto TV, all for free. We're coming in blazing with favorites like True Grit and Once Upon a Time in Mexico. Or immerse yourself in binge-worthy series like Yellowstone and Walker, Texas Ranger. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies, TV shows, and more. The best part? It's free. No credit card, no sign-up, no fees. Download the Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming now.